Audra.
Thank you. Tom again with the neuro team. It's nice to see you. Appreciate your patience as we try to get some studies done for Leon. It's okay with you? I'll do an exam and
Sure,
we'll
you
chat.
want me to cut the lights on? You can cut the lights on.
No, it's actually all good. I got this
good.
right here,
Oh,
which
okay.
is going to help me.
Okay, take your time, whatever you need to do.
Yeah.
Did you hear that this had went off? The alarm had went off like that. The air had stopped. Did you hear about that?
No, I didn't hear about that.
It made like a loud alarm sound.
Okay.
And it was 2 doctors in here, but it went back. They said somebody flatlined for a second and went back to working or something like that. I couldn't understand what they were saying.
Yeah. Okay. As soon as we get done talking, I'll talk with them. And
Okay. They started talking about the pressure in the air or something. I don't know. Whew. Yeah, when I don't think she was in here, when the 2 doctors was in here, and the alarm went off real loud.
Oh, the respiratory therapy?
Uh-huh.
Just the
With the
vent.
vent.
Yeah, okay.
I think her intestines and studies.
Gotcha. Okay. Good to know, but yeah. A very loud alarm to get people's attention, but that does happen time to time. Hey, Leon. Leon. Leon, open your eyes. Leon, squeeze my fingers. Squeeze my fingers, Leon. And he's off stage. Is there a chair in here?
Yes, right here.
I'm gonna stare right at it.
It's okay.
Alright, I know we had a chance to talk on Monday. We had a chance to talk about what we've seen on the EEG and with the CT scans. But just to remind you, the CT scan fortunately does show some evidence of injury from the cardiac arrest. We can't get an MRI, which is a more detailed picture because of that device that's helping his heart. And then the EEG, we're seeing seizures kind of end of last week, and as we were saying Monday, things had looked better from a seizure standpoint, but when we took off the sedation, it was, I used the word on Monday, it's called suppressed. It just means the electrical activity is pretty low, and when you stimulate him, his EEG doesn't react. And it looks like that was consistent up until we discontinued it yesterday. And then we got that SSEP study today. And one of the things we talked about on Monday, I don't know if you remember, it's helpful if something doesn't show up, if it is there, it doesn't really push us one way or the other. And it does look like he has reaction in one arm, and it was a limited study, just technically. So the results of that, don't point us definitively in a bad direction. And on exam today, similar to Monday, he has those really basic brainstem functions. His pupils react. He squeezes his eyes when I stimulate them. He coughs when I put the suction catheter down.
Oh, that's better because he wasn't coughing before. I think that's better.
And he unfortunately doesn't, like I was saying Monday, and I'm sure you've seen it, he doesn't follow any commands, and he has some movements in his legs when I apply noxious stimuli. And it's this movement that we see where patients will kind of do this movement.
Yeah, that's what he's been doing.
It's a movement that we see that is unfortunately not indicative of higher brainstem reaction to that painful stimulus. It's just a reflex arc through the spine that doesn't necessarily go any further up to the brain. So it's just kind of a reflexive movement to that stimulus. So all that being said,
like sometimes when we don't touch him and we tell him to move his toes, he still does it.
Okay.
So I don't know.
Yeah, and it's tricky because I'm only seeing him for brief moments, and the team here is only seeing him for brief moments. I can only go off of what I see. But to kind of get back to what we were going to talk about today is kind of what does it look like moving forward. And it's helpful to think through kind of where people can land after cardiac arrest. At least a starting point. There's a group of patients that are awake after, they follow commands, and that's obviously what we all want for everybody. And they have a good prognosis. And then there's kind of on the other end of the spectrum, evidence of their brainstem not working, or they have really bad imaging, or the EEG looks bad, and unfortunately all the signs point to a devastating injury, and that's one end. And then there's a bigger kind of bucket of people where it's some mixed features of like the exam looks okay, but it's not as good as we want, and imaging and EEG looks a little mixed. And there's a spectrum there where it can kind of look better, and it can kind of look like the prognosis is a little bit more guarded. And kind of to bring it all together, as you can probably imagine, we are seeing kind of a mixed picture. The CT scan, shows some evidence of some injury. The EEG is looking suppressed, which indicates he may have sustained an injury that we kind of know from the imaging. And then his exam is a little bit mixed. He has the most basic functions of his brain, but he's not waking up. So that's where something like neuroprognosis comes in. when we talk about prognosis, it's hard to kind of speak about what does a good outcome look like without kind of knowing what Leon was like. Was he a pretty active guy? Was he good with his hands? Was he a tool, like workman, yard, car kind of thing? Was he a computer guy? What kind of stuff did he
Well,
do?
he was, he did heavy work,
Okay.
like lumber, heavy lifting, things like that. He worked in a plant.
Okay.
He did machinery, stuff like that.
Okay. That's good to know. It's you know, it's the part of knowing Leon that I lean on you and I lean on families to kind of paint a picture. Because what that recovery from a neurologic perspective looks like is, and what's meaningful for different people is different. And that's where we lean on you.
Well, he was retired ever since 2015. So he was home. You know, he helped out a lot around the house until he had a knee injury.
Gotcha.
And the knee injury is just like what slowed him down. Other than that, his doctors had his heart and stuff under control with medication.
Yeah.
Because he with congestive heart failure since 2015, but he had like the best doctors. You know, they kept a combination. You know, they would change it up, whatever he needed from his results or whatever. Just kept him real stable. I mean, you know, the congestive heart failure didn't improve, but it didn't really go too bad until, you know, it's almost been 10 years till it started kind of trying to affect his kidney.
Yeah.
And then, you know, y'all had got his kidney back on track, you know, so we were looking forward to the LVAD, you know. It was really positive.
A long battle that he's fought this. And, so when we talk about from a neurologic perspective, you know, what does a good prognosis look like? You know, unfortunately in the world of neurology, what's a good and meaningful recovery is not always what families or patients see as good. You know, being able to interact with friends and family and their loved ones, but on a kind of basic level, you know, usually dependent on family members for a lot of care, if not all, and essentially being able to meaningfully interact with the world around them, with an expectation, not an expectation, but a caution that there's likely going to be some deficit of some kind, physically or mentally, cognitively, I should say. And oftentimes that recovery is unpredictable. You know, how much a recovery Leon would make, it's hard to say. And the timing of what that would look like is, you know, on the order of weeks to months, and that's very unpredictable. And based on what we've seen thus far, all the things that I talked about, the kind of prognosis is unfortunately going to be kind of a poor prognosis, with the caveat that there is some uncertainty. You know, there's a lot of different. I'm happy to talk through all of how this all works and the studies that kind of inform this kind of language, but you know, as you can imagine, unfortunately, there are a lot of patients in Leon's shoes, and we have a lot of information, but even within that, we can't say it's a poor prognosis, like for sure. There is some uncertainty to that.
I mean, I've talked to some friends and family that say, you know, some of their loved ones been through the same thing, and now they're up and moving around. So, and then you got on the other scale, like you said, some that don't do as well. So, you know, we just really don't know what to expect right now.
Yeah. And kind of the brain is just one part of Leon's body, so it's important to keep into context, the rest of what's going on. The heart failure issues are still there, and keeping an eye on his kidneys are still there. So at this point, you may be wondering what's the next step, what's the kind of the decision point. I don't know if the team here has talked with you about that at all.
No, nobody's talked to me about anything. I was asking his at-home doctor about the possibility of us getting closer to home at a hospital, and that. So his other family members would want to come and see him. They really can't travel this far.
Yeah.
But, he said he would have to look into that. Y'all would have to approve it or whatever,
Yeah.
So.
And that's something might ultimately leave up to the ICU, kind of a team that knows
more about
his
it.
entire care. Yeah. But yeah, this is kind of the point where we're going to kind of rely on you to speak for him, since he's in a state where he can't advocate for himself. We lean on you. And it's some tough decisions that will need to be made, and never having been in that situation myself, I can only appreciate how it often feels like families are making a decision for them.
I never been in this situation either. My mom had pancreatic cancer, but she survived with 2 years with that diagnosis, and then she just decided to stop all her treatments. And then my baby brother lived for 3 years with brain cancer. And then my dad, he passed right at 4 months after my mom. My mom passed in 2020. Dad passed 4 months later in April, with just popped up with an aneurysm out of nowhere. And then it was not even a year later that my baby brother, passed with the brain cancer. But he had been for 3 years. So I kind of expected. I knew my mom was going, and I knew my brother was going. But my dad was very unexpected. So
I'm sorry. It's hard. And this is,
So I never been through this here,
And the more, I just encourage you to think about it as you're speaking for him. You're not deciding for him. You're just, don't know if you've ever had a conversation with him about what he'd want, but to the best of your knowledge, just advocate for him. And
well, when he came here, he wanted to do everything. He said he wanted to live. He was trying the LVAD. I said, honey, whatever you want to do. And I came with him to support him. And we were on the road to get him the LVAD. That was our mindset, So he wanted to, he did. I was like, well, the kids want to have a cookout and the family wants to get together and, celebrate you and this and that. And he was like, I'm not thinking about that right now. I'm thinking about my recovery. That's what he told me. So.
And I'll let the ICU team kind of discuss in more detail the next steps, but essentially, kind of, there's this fork in the road where, if you think Leon would want to, give it time and see what would happen, to see if he could have a recovery where he could wake up and interact with the world around him, that leads to things like a feeding tube often, and often an airway so that he can be breathing okay, something called a trach and a peg. So the peg is the feeding tube and the trach is the airway. But if you think, and like I was saying, that recovery is going to be a long and pretty hard road for him and for everyone that's taking care of him. And if you think that he wouldn't want to do that, and for his own care, for you, for kind of all the dynamics, he would want to not pursue that. Things like withdrawal of care is often where things go. So those are kind of broad strokes, kind of
from one end to the other end.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I know it sounds like you guys haven't talked through that yet, so I'll kind of just lay out the options, and they may have some other things they'll want to talk to you about that may impact your decision. But
okay.
that's where we're at from a neuro perspective.
Okay. Alright.
Any questions for me?
No questions right now. I just need to know, what they say his options are and what we can, do and talk with the family and everything.
Okay. There's a lot to process. So what we'll do from here is I'll go talk to the team, kind of tell them what I'm seeing on exam and what things look like from our perspective, and I'll mention that we kind of started to get into those option discussions, and they'll kind of take over from here and weigh in on how he's doing from a cardiac standpoint, and like I was saying, kind of holistically.
Right.
He's got some other things that need working on. So.
Yeah. Okay. We'll see from there.
Yeah. Like I said, I do really appreciate your patience. I know it's been days since this happened, and you've been waiting for us, and we just want to make sure we get this right and get everything we can to help this discussion. So
exactly. Well, God made it possible for me to be here for him because I've been through my medical stuff too. So, but impossible to be here. I'm gonna be here.
Yeah. I'm sure he appreciates it. I appreciate you being here fighting for him and speaking out for him.
Thank you.
If any questions for the neuro team pop up, we're around. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. You want me to leave this chair here? You want me to put it back?
You can lay right there. It's fine. Okay. Thank you.